Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dine with the Divine. I'm your host, Ashley, and together we'll be exploring the magical, the mystical, and everything in between. So on today's episode, we're going to discuss how no one can seem to pronounce Deutsch right, and another demonized goddess. So I hope everyone is having a fantastic week, and if you're not, I hope it gets better soon. So today we have a fantastic guest. We have Hex Marie here with us. So, Hex Marie is a Pennsylvania Dutch and German American folk magic practitioner. Online, she shares insights and thoughts about folklore and fairy tales, German and German American folk magic, animism, and paganism with a modern eclectic lens. As an instructor, she guides students to find the breadcrumbs of folklore and story that can lead her students back to their forgotten cultural heritage of ancestral wisdom and connection. Hi, Hex Marie, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. I'm so glad you're here. Okay. First, I love to ask people, how did you get started?
Okay, how I got started. I guess if I really think back, I started like in middle school when I was getting into astrology.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry about that. But at that time, it was still like total cognitive dissonance because I was raised Mormon.
Mm-hmm.
And so after I left the church as an adult, a young adult, like 23, pretty soon after that, I started to get into tarot and New Age stuff as a bridge out of the religion I was raised in. And then in the past few years, probably going on 4 years now, I just had a string of things in my life, including having my daughter, that got me interested in my own ancestry and ancestor work. And so that has been this German folk magic and Pennsylvania Dutch folk magic part of my path really started with the birth of my daughter. I'm sure we'll get into more. That was when I got interested into Frau Berchta. And that started my relationship with her, and it's just taken me off by storm from there.
Wow. Okay. Did you, and I feel like some people have the same thing, especially when they have kids. I know a lot of people feel like, oh, I really want to find out who I am and that kind of thing, so I can carry that on to my child. Is that part of what you felt like you experienced?
I feel so as I got going with the practice, it did turn into that because just even things like doing holidays with your kids, you think about those things. But really what led me to this was the struggles I had as a new mom. There's a long family history of struggling with mental health and specifically around postpartum.
Okay.
And it was such an intense experience. And then also my daughter was born just a little bit early, and then feeding her was difficult because of that. And so the struggles with all of that and the intensity of that experience, I really felt when I was pregnant, like I was on the liminal edge between life and death.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
And I felt that like you are channeling a soul in, and also there's a death and rebirth as the mother as well, because lack of a better word, like your girlhood, there's something about you that you leave behind in a sense. And that was all so intense that I really needed that connection. And then when I was giving birth, there was actually this kind of miraculous moment where I almost needed a C-section and they stopped my labor. And then they were getting me ready for a C-section. They give you a shot. It stops the contractions. And I was at like 8 centimeters because the baby's heart was dropping. And in that moment, I just went inside myself and talked to her and told her, we're going to get you out safe either way. It might be easier if you could come out the natural way. But if not, they have a doctor in the other room. And then when they checked me after that 30 minutes of stop contraction, I had dilated fully to a 10.
Oh,
and
wow.
I pushed her out in like 3 pushes. So it was like in that moment, I really felt what I would consider now this like ancestral connection. And then as I got interested in these things and started to do more of the research,
I see all the time, don't worry.
So that feeling, now I consider it did feel very magical. It did almost feel like a presence, like a white light, like calm in the storm. And now that is what I associate with what I feel the ancestors feel like to me. And I would liken it to like the oxytocin, that feeling that you're safe
Yeah.
and everything's going to be okay and that you're being held by something bigger than you. And the folk magic practice and getting into my ancestors has given me a way to understand that and give language. And I know those first months would have been a lot easier for me, I think, it would have been more immediate for me understanding what was happening if I had the stories of Frau Berchta at that time, because I felt like I needed that. And finding her stories really gave me a lens to understand the extreme experiences I had as a mother. Because it really doesn't line up with the Hallmark movie image. Way more intense and insane. And just, it's a gritty, crazy experience.
Yeah, I'm not a mother, but all of my friends who are have it's so funny because like you hear all these things when you're growing up in movies and stuff, and you just expect it to be like, oh, and everything's fine. Blah, blah. And then my first inkling was when I was in nursing school, I took like my labor delivery class, and our teacher told us, if a mother has a baby and she all of a sudden is, oh my God, I love this baby. I love you more than life. Like they're like, that's actually not safe. They were like, yeah, they actually said it's when you see moms who are like, hi, that's totally normal. Because this is somebody
like I was like, hi.
Yeah, that's what they're like, that's actually way healthier and normal because you're now responsible for this person you don't know. You're like, yes, they were growing in you, but it's like, I don't know you. Hi, hello, how are you? Like,
well, I mean, as they grow and you get to know them, it does make sense why a lot of cultures have beliefs about forms of reincarnation in the family line. Because as they start to grow and things come up, there's things that come up that are like, oh, I know this. And also like the child's on to you. Like something about them knows where you come from. And I remember feeling like things are really good now. I went through that experience. It was a very intense experience, but I got through it on the other side pretty well, all things considered. But I remember when my daughter was still an infant and didn't have language, I just felt like she was looking in my soul and just like, okay, we know that stuff's gone down in this family. Are you going to be a good mom or a bad mom? Because I'm ready.
She's like, I'm going to test you. See what you're about.
Let's think about that.
It's so funny. But it goes with what you're saying. It's almost like she looked at you. So she's like, are you going to break the curse? Are you going to break ancestral trauma? And you're like, whoa, I didn't ask for all this responsibility. I just have to take care of you and make sure you're alive.
Right. But they, on some level, of course, consciously, our minds are formed through all of our interactions. But then at the same time, we do know through like epigenetics and the fact that when your mother was in your grandmother's uterus, that's when the eggs were formed. So there is part of her that was around for everything. When there's a part of her that knows that. And I think rightly, when we think about from a public health stance, we want to limit exposure to traumas for children so that they can have the best shot growing up.
Yeah.
But from a practical sense, if things have been hard, your body needs to know.
Yes.
Not enough to think they're coming into kumbaya land.
Yeah.
And I think, and it is like definitely I feel like a dialogue with your ancestors and the past and the present and the future, raising your child and just like getting to do things differently, or just a lot of things, they'll bring up all your traumas. So, and just things that trigger you, they might even have similarities to your personality that it's like, oh my gosh, is this what it's like for everyone to deal with me? I
love that we're talking about the kid aspect because we will get more into that later. But okay, so we have that start with us. So this is great. I really love the fact you do a lot of different videos on TikTok. That's where like I've seen a lot of your videos, which I really enjoy. They're very informational. And you're just so pretty. Like that's also very nice. You're just a very aesthetically nice looking person. So, oh, you talk a lot about what I like, and a lot of different creators have started doing this, is living in America. When people kind of start reaching back, I feel it breaks down your own biases and things. And you talk about this in a few different videos.
Yeah. And especially when because I think there's different ways to connect to your ancestors. So just in dominant culture, we don't have this sense of an active living ancestral veneration on a personal level for most Americans. I feel like there's definitely exceptions to that. But the dominant white American culture, especially, there's a disconnect there. But then at the same time, look at Hamilton. We put these statues up, and that's another form of ancestral veneration.
Yeah.
And I think as we deconstruct, if you're somebody who is, I think a lot of people who are into witchcraft or folk magic, any of that, there are people who are wanting to dig under the surface and see the need to rehabilitate things in our culture, or just deal with the reality that so many people are waking up to, that it's like, oh, I was raised in this little fake garden.
Yeah.
And you get outside there and none of this was true. What I was told wasn't true. And I have found that although it took me a long time to connect to my ancestors consciously in that way, it has been extremely powerful, because for me, it's been different than I expect. It's definitely that dark goddess, not that it's just goddesses at all, but it's that kind of dark goddess energy, that intensity. And also, in my opinion, in my personal experience, as you connect to the older layer of ancestors too, because this line goes back to the beginning, like your layer of ancestry or your, like family tree goes back to the beginning of life on Earth.
Yeah.
It's a really weird, strange process.
Yeah.
It's like whoever your grandma was. So I have found that to be a very extremely powerful allies in that work. And I have found it that the sense I get from my ancestors really lines up to what I hear from Indigenous people and people of color, where there is this just being real, being for real, that the ancestors on the other side, the ones who are still around and helping out and like are worthy of the title of ancestors, because that's a job, not just all the dead. And the ones that are worthy of that title, they all know what's going on right now.
Yeah.
They know this moment of change and transformation we're going through. And they also know on a deeper level than what any of us can understand how we got where we're at now. I saw someone talking about recently, she was saying, I think this is very common, especially for people who have German ancestry, because rightly there's a lot of shame around that identity and what has happened in the past few hundred years, and specifically with the Holocaust. And there is a lot of shame around that. However, when the whole of the history of the last 500 years has been a complete shit show, nobody is particularly more, I don't know. It's not like there's an easy bad guy, good guy. And I think that's something that actually I was very influenced by Hoodoo podcasts like It's Jujube, because I realized I had always been hesitant because, first of all, I just thought, oh, we're just normal white people growing up. Like my great grandpa spoke German and had a thick German accent. But I'm like, this is what white people are like. Because at World War II, we just stopped speaking because we've been in America like 300 years. I don't think I have any direct ancestors who were around in Germany in that time. But we stopped speaking German because my ancestors are from Pennsylvania, or a quarter of them at least. And then you just never talked about it. It was just like like the white color of the walls, nobody talks about. But then when I was like listening to its Jujubee talk about stuff, it's like I realized, wait a second here. If African Americans in their spiritual practices are dealing with their ancestors and they are being supported by their ancestors and they're dealing with that conflict inside themselves because they have both sides of that inside themselves, then what excuse do I have? Like, it must be possible. Like, it's theory because it was bad and it was just you're talking to all the bad people.
Yeah.
Practitioners wouldn't be doing that.
But everything you're saying is so true. I think, and I was having this discussion with people, like, no matter who you are, where your family's from, you reach far enough back, you have a problematic ancestor. Everybody has one. Like, and you have multiple. We all have multiple problematic ancestors. And it doesn't matter your race, ethnicity, your religion. Somebody did something wrong and they probably shouldn't have done that. But it doesn't take away from being proud of your culture or the take away from like the interesting folk tales. It's okay to have all that. And it's okay to be like, yeah, I probably had an ancestor who was not so great.
Well, one of my family's Mormon, and I came across on the plains and was part of that whole colonization of the West. Yeah, we all have that, especially in America. I think in some ways that's a strength for us as Americans because those of us who are socially aware and spiritual and starting to uncover these things, we are in the new world, which is not a new world. We are here and we have like, oh crap, we see what we did. Like we can look at pictures from a couple hundred years ago and it's like, wow, that river's gone. What the crap happened?
Yes.
Buffalo cutting down the redwoods for no reason. Like we didn't need to cut down everything. And that's so blatant in our face. And the history of slavery, I think for a lot of Europeans, I haven't spent time. I have European friends in America, but I haven't gotten to spend time in Europe yet. But the sense I get is that a lot of European countries don't see how complicit they are in the situations in the rest of the world. I was watching something. I think it was in the Netherlands. I'm always getting the Netherlands and Denmark. That's my confession. I'm always getting the Netherlands and Denmark confused.
That's okay.
What's Netherlands? It's the Dutch. And they're the ones who were the big slavers or one of the big slavers. I watched a little video where they were talking about how the Dutch like to say that they're a model country for the rest of the world because they're so equal and progressive and all this stuff. And then
you're like, bro.
And then just like, yeah, it's just, and then like a lot of the people, because of that history of colonization, I can't remember which country specifically was a colony and has that relationship. There's a lot of Black people who have ended up there because of that. And they're like, hello. Like, I live on a street, it's named after a slaver.
Yeah.
But in America, if your eyes are open, which more and more people's are, thank goodness, we just can't ignore that. And that's good because there's no reason to if you're really sick, you should go to the doctor. Ignoring it or trying to be love and light, or you can't really grow that way. And we can't change ourselves by abandoning our folk culture. I think we then actually do abandon it to, unfortunately, people who do not have good motivations.
Yeah.
And I think that happens a lot in specifically the kind of heathen spirituality place. I think of culture as a process too. We should all be proud because we're alive and our ancestors survived, and the majority of that is relatively wholesome-ish, as families are, a mixed bag.
Everything you're saying, I check mark, because I was just thinking while you were talking, I was reading about somewhere where the British were like, we're so much better than Americans because Americans had slavery for mad long, but we realized a few decades earlier that it was wrong. I'm like, excuse me, just me, quick question, public British. Do you guys remember the whole like the sun doesn't? What is it? This
Yes, I never said so
on the British Empire. Remember that whole thing?
Yeah.
Remember how you guys were quote unquote conquering everybody and then killing people and then making them all abandon their cultures? Do you think that's like so much better? Like, I don't think
it's like India would like to enter the chat.
India, New Zealand, Australia, they have some things to say.
My revenue. Revenue. Yes, give up one, so we'll give you that.
Exactly. Like, oh, okay. Like, this is not a terrible Olympics, and just you like, oh, we're like,
yeah. And I think that ends up getting us out of accountability, to be honest, because it's not engaging. And I think we're really scared because I think in like that dominant waspy American culture, it's just so embarrassing to be wrong or be ignorant and all of that. But it's just like, guys, the cat's out of the bag. Everyone knows we're ignorant. That's not a secret. It's not nearly your fault because the country's still completely segregated. So and those things are awkward and it's okay. And the first time you talk to someone from a new culture, you're going to misunderstand and you might look silly, and that's okay.
And I think it's so important that people understand also, like you just said, it's okay to look silly. It's also okay to ask people about their culture as long as you're not being an asshole about it. Yeah, if you have a question like why, for instance, I have friends of different religions, and if I don't understand why they're doing something or something, I just ask in a polite way, hey, oh, is that a part of your custom? Because, and if I don't know, I can try to Google it. And if there's somebody close to me and they don't mind me asking, I'll ask them. But like, it's important to just educate yourself. You don't have to just be embarrassed and then get mad. Okay, nobody's mad at you, but then try to educate yourself. Just try.
Because if you ask a question and then someone's like, hey, yeah, no, like you never have to ask that particular question again. Another route.
That's it. Like it's just be like, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize that was offensive, and then Google it, and then you'll be fine.
Like this thing that this whole myth of whiteness that it's like there's some hierarchy of humans and that we're supposed to be smarter and better and like more civilized. I think even though I think a lot of people, obviously that sounds bad now, and so a lot of people wouldn't say that directly, that's still like the foundation of the way we're taught to think about history and the rest of the world, and like a kind of way we fetishize our type of technology and things like that. That just wasn't ever true because people are just people. All people are really smart.
Exactly.
And all people are stupid too and like silly and like we're apes. I don't know. I think that fear just like keeps you from connecting. It's that cycle. Our culture wants to get us all so afraid and separate from each other. And so I think that can even be an offering you give. You can say, you know what? I am going to enter into things and make friendships with people who are different than me and have experiences I haven't had. And I'm willing to be a student.
Yeah, because that's what we all are.
Awake and listen and learn to be helpful.
That's all you gotta do. Honestly,
we don't need to solve anything. Like we all have things on our plate, things we can give, things that's our job to solve. But the whole world, that's everybody's job.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. That's so true. Everybody, the world will be easier. Just learn. Okay.
I say this, and yet, like all the time, I'm so overthinking. Just especially because being on the internet, because it's like you can, I don't know, just like people who you didn't know were in the room end up in the room, and you're like, "Whoa, that's what I said."
I know it's so hard, and I feel like that's another thing that people, and I hate it, but I get it. I used to be like, oh, people who are so afraid of this, it's because they are. No, like you can say anything, and somebody can be like, I didn't like that. Which number one, it's fine, but I think the most important thing is to engage in helpful, constructive conversations is important. Don't just yell and scream that you don't like something. And then when someone comes to you and they're, let me know what I said to you or what I said that wasn't, and then you're just like, shut up. That's not helpful. If somebody really is offended, or I've done things where I know I've said something incorrectly and someone has explained to me or said, hey, that wasn't right. People will take offense to it. And if I can learn from that, that just makes me a better person. And without yelling and screaming at me, I'm more apt to be like, yeah, okay, let me figure out what the problem. Even so, it depends on the kind of person you are, but like I am always more apt to be like, okay, I want to educate myself. I don't want to be an asshole.
Mm.
I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want to upset anyone or disregard somebody's culture. So I always want to learn, but it's easier when we all can help each other a little bit out. And
Yeah.
at least just not, you don't have to teach everybody. You don't have to be the representative for a culture, but just don't be a dick about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think each of us were in a different position. Some of us are just curious and I make content and share it. And so then because I did that, there's a certain level of responsibility I have to hold a safe container for other people. And it is something that I don't always know exactly how to go about it, but it's something that I'm very aware of because, yeah, it just comes up a lot. I avoided digging into, I guess, German customs and history and folk magic. I avoided that for like decades because of some of that stigma that we have around that. And it just made it invisible. We're just like, oh yeah, we're white people. We're normal white people. But it didn't seem weird. But then, and I think too, the main thing is like the whole Odinist thing, because in the whole I think the Norse heathen side of things takes up a lot of air in the room that isn't. That's actually people, anytime they talk about German mythology or German gods, they always go straight to Norse, but that's from like up in Iceland. So that's the very tip of the Germanic world that goes the whole way down into the edges of Czechoslovakia and the Alps and France. It's very far away from Iceland. Not that there isn't a lot of connection. There definitely is. But then because I'm in America, I have lived most of my life in the West. I've lived in Pennsylvania too, but mostly in the West. And so most of the people who are like, oh, I'm a heathen, it's like this kind of military Odinist, sometimes very white supremacist stuff.
Yeah.
And so I think rightfully I was like, I'm not going to touch that. Like,
yeah, we stay away from skinheads. Oh no. Yeah.
And then it's like I didn't even realize, where do you think the fairy tales come from? Where do you think Sleeping Beauty comes from?
Yeah.
Where do you think Hansel and Gretel comes from?
Yeah.
And those stories, that's like a whole different world of wisdom and myth and connection than the warrior thing. Because it ends up being like those fairy tales, not that there aren't warrior stories and ghost stories that involve warriors, but a lot of it has to do with like old women looking out for little scoundrel orphans and giving them little breadcrumbs to survive. And that's like a whole different world. Yeah.
This is so good. Oh, I love that. Yes. Okay. We're gonna go to our dish of the week, and we're gonna talk about some Pennsylvania Dutch classics on account of this is your background and this is what you love to talk about, and we love to hear about it. So we're going to talk about some different foods that you'll find in the Pennsylvania Dutch area. And I've mentioned it before. I think I actually mentioned this on like a podcast or two ago. One thing I love about Pennsylvania Dutch, and I'm specifically right now talking about Amish people, we'll get into the whole calification, is their furniture. That has nothing to do with dishes. But that's the best furniture, and I will bring it up every time. Amish people can build some furniture. Let me tell you,
It's really interesting because some of them simply don't they all have different rules. And so some of the furniture makers, I know like my family commissioned a big table. It was very wishful thinking on my dad's part, like a table with like a million leaves that can just stretch through the hole. It's like, you might have wanted to invest it in relationships with your children. Anyway, but they'll have like called hydraulic woodworking tools, which is really interesting. That's so that they're not like on the grid, because every single group will have different rules about if they're allowed to use electricity or what the rules are around it.
Yes, there's this guy on TikTok who I also follow. I think his name is Eli Yoder. He is, do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, he is a former Amish, and he's from like he says the old world order, so it's like a very
Like,
strict.
he's a character.
Oh yeah, he's
Yeah.
hilarious. I love. I think he's so funny. But I love watching his videos because he is super awesome. He answers any question people have about the Amish. He explains, and he has his story about his life is also, it's a lot, but it's very interesting. Yeah, and he's very funny. If you ever want to know about Amish culture, I'm sure there's plenty of really good Amish TikTokers, the ones who can get on the internet or are allowed to. It's very interesting.
Kind of like former Amish too. I can't remember her account right now, but there was a woman on Amish. I was like going to say Amish talk. Maybe that's who was former Amish, and it was so interesting because she was really into like fashion and makeup, and to hear her talk about how she thought about her bonnet when she was Amish and how she would sit just so the line of her bonnet would match up because she just thought it was the most beautiful thing in the world, and she's just sitting there going, oh wow, this is such a fun. That's why I love TikTok, because like you wouldn't get it to peek into people's lives and their interior in that way.
I know.
I thought about that, like the girly Amish girls, because they're there.
Of course, like some of them are like making their hems just because they're like, I look cute like this, and like good for them.
Watching at church.
It doesn't matter what your culture is. When you want to look cute, you want to look cute.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Okay, so some of the foods we have here, we've got potato donuts. So potato donuts use mashed potatoes or riced potatoes, whole milk, eggs, butter, sugar, baking powder, all-purpose flour, and you deep fry them. They're probably like those like cakey donuts, not like the fried donuts, and those can be really good. So we got that. Then we got some good old-fashioned pork chops. Let's see what we're putting on the pork chops. We got butter, pineapple juice can go on the pork chops, ketchup. I like that because that sweetness probably is really good. White vinegar, honey, mustard, salt, cornstarch, water. That sounds nice.
We always make pork chops for New Year's. It's the traditional. You'll have sauerkraut and pork chops for New Year's as like a good meal.
Okay.
And in that you'll put a bit of sauerkraut, and then the pork chops, which I think you'll like caramelize those or not. That's not the right word. Brown them. And then apples, brown sugar, and then it like cooks a really long time. It's really good.
Okay, yeah, that sounds really delicious. That's another thing about the Pennsylvania Dutch people. Y'all can cook some serious food. It's not a joke, guys. Yeah, you go. We have I don't think it's still there, but we used to have an Amish market not far from where I lived, and their breads, their pretzels, oh my God. It's their butter. Everything is like better.
We are known to like to eat.
I don't blame you guys. You can all.
It's interesting because since the Pennsylvania Dutch community, I think we'll get into this a little bit. They came as a more family units, and before Germany existed as a country, and it was mostly poor people at that point when Pennsylvania was settled. And so they really brought like peasant culture to the Americas. And so there's definitely this different attitude about eating, and even I think to some extent like fatness, because just more people are big in Pennsylvania, especially compared to like Utah. Utah is like, I don't know, Instagram influencer land. But there was this Pennsylvania Dutch saying that translates to something like a plump wife and a big barn never did a man harm.
Hey, it's true though. It's true though. And if you see a lot of the time, not specifically Pennsylvania Dutch, but you think of like how, and I don't know if it's always good, so I don't mean to be like weird, but like how German women are depicted, right? Whether it's like old-timey stuff. They were always bigger women. They were always very strong women. They were always like, they got their shit together quickly, and they usually got their husband's shit together quick.
Oh, yeah. It's a story, I can't remember which town it is, but there's a story of in the Middle Ages where there were a walled town was being laid siege, and something happened where they were letting the women out, and they're like, the women, you can leave and carry whatever you can on your back. And they all carried their husbands on their back. How? Yeah.
There's always like that toughness depicted. So I feel like people think that way. So I feel like if they see a German woman or a Pennsylvania Dutch that's like a little bigger, oh yeah, that's chill. Like that's how they are. Like they're working. Like they're busy women. Like,
yeah. It did. That like fat phobia did come from wealthy people, like seeing how pious they are.
Yes.
So, and for a lot of us, for most of history, we couldn't really afford to just be choosing to skip meals like that. It's a weird thing to do.
It is. And if you think about even most cultures, like you said, most cultures, the middle or peasant classes, the women were usually built to work. Like they were not sitting home all day and dainty little things and work. No.
They weren't getting married as young either. It's like idealizing really young women that are small and easy to control. That just wasn't, not that there wasn't patriarchy for sure.
Yeah.
We have issues for sure, but like, it's just, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And even just certain things like people say now, like, oh, we used to need to be able to get fat because people would go hungry, but now it's bad. It's like, you do realize there are hungry people.
Like, what?
Just all of that. You do realize.
Like, there are people who don't eat.
You should talk like that. It's like, you guys, knock on wood.
What do you mean?
Yeah, like I hope we still have enough food the whole time I'm alive. That'd be great.
I know. It's scary. And it's scary out here. Speaking of that, like, kind of peasant culture, another thing I found when I was like reading about the different foods is a lot of these foods are like down home foods, like foods you can make with what's growing around you, or if you have a little garden or you got an apple tree, you're making apple butter or apple pie, like those kinds of foods that now we idealize as country foods, like backwoods kind of food. People were not just making it to be cute. Now people make it to be cute and put it on Instagram. Back then it was like, no, we got apples. Yeah. So we're going to we got apples, we got flour, we got wheat, we got yeast. So we're making a pie or we're making some bread. That's it.
Yeah. And I think, of course, there's like a spectrum of people because people came from different socioeconomic backgrounds. And especially as time went on and America became more developed and the cities became more livable, there were more and more immigrants coming from Germany who had more money. But I do think that when I think about the Pennsylvania Dutch, it's very much that down to earth, just type thing. Like my family, they were farmers up until like my grandpa was the first one to go to college. And so they were just very like humble people and down to earth people. And there really was a value of using what you have because it wasn't because you need to, and that's how you should do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I love that. So the other foods we have, I'm just going to tell you guys what it is, and then we're going to go to our next part. We got blueberry jam, which is a jam, and it's delicious. Who doesn't love a blueberry jam? We got apple butter, which who doesn't love that? Baked apples and corn pie. Again, all the links will be in the show notes if you want to look up like how to make those things. But I just want to get to the next part because we still have a lot to talk about, guys. This is this whole thing situation. Okay, real quick, we're gonna plug the podcast because I have to do it, right? So if you guys are enjoying this, please follow me on. Make sure that you're subscribed so you can get a new episode every Thursday. It's free. You can do it. We're Dine with the Divine on Instagram and Facebook and Threads and TikTok. If you really enjoy this show, please pause now, or if you're driving, do it later. You can give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It really helps a lot. So I love when you guys do it. Thank you so much. And if you want to, you can give me a little tip if you really feel inclined. And if you have any suggestions for episodes, questions, comments, constructive critiques, feel free to email me at dinewiththedivinepod@gmail.com. I will talk to you. Don't worry. Just let me know if you want to talk. Okay, here we go. We're on to our tea time section. We've got to get going because this is serious, guys. So we're talking about Pennsylvania Dutch. Now, some of you may say, who the hell is that? Maybe if you're not in America, you might be like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. Let me tell you, there's a whole story behind it, okay? So we have to start at the beginning. So everybody, picture it. We're in lower Rhineland. So this is like lower Germany. Hex Marie said before, Germany was like a bunch. It was like how Italy was like a bunch of principalities at one time instead of just like a country. So was Germany.
Like kingdoms.
Yes, that's what it is. A bunch of kingdoms. And there was lots of princes. Think Snow White era. Think all that. Like there was a lot going on. And everybody had very elaborate outfits. And it was cute. The royalty. If you look back their outfits, they're very cool. Anyway, yes. So we're in lower Germany. So this is in the 1600s, early 1600s. The Reformation has happened. And now there's northern Germans that are still Protestants, while the lower Rhineland, so the lower part of Germany, they were still Catholic and Anabaptist. Now, quick note. You're like, what are you talking about? Reach back in your minds. You guys heard about the Reformation. Remember Martin Luther? He was German. He said, F you, Catholic Church. You guys are doing the most. He got real mad. He wrote a whole list of things that he needed to change, and he put it on the door of a church. And everybody's like, oh, shit. The Catholic Church excommunicated him. And he's like, no problem. I'm going to start my own branch of churches, and we're going to be Protestants because we're protesting. Get it?
And we hate art.
Yeah. And we hate art. Screw that. You probably didn't need to hate art, sir, but I understand.
That was the problem.
The other problem is that during the Middle Ages, which is a little bit before this, the Catholic Church was taking tons of money from everybody they could because they wanted to paint the Sistine Chapel and shit. And so everybody got sick of that shit. They were like, they're coming around to the villages. They're not coming around to the princes and the kings and the emperors. They're asking regular ass people who probably don't have a lot of money. There's a big gap these days between poor people and rich people. There's not much of a middle class. Yeah, so they're going around telling everybody their mom's in purgatory and they can't get out until they give them a donation. And everybody got real sick of that shit. They were like, we don't have money to begin with, Catholic Church. So that's part of why Martin Luther started to get so pissed off, right? So that's one of the many reasons he got mad. We could do a whole episode on Martin Luther, and we might one day. Anyway, so now the Germany, that's not really Germany, but we're going to call it that right now, it's split, right? Like I said, the Northerners are going to be Protestants. They're going with Martin Luther. And the Germans in Southern Germany, they're going to be Catholic and Anabaptist. We're going to get to Anabaptist. Don't worry. Just remember that. There was a whole war. There's this called the 30-Year War, and it just kept happening. And it really sucked. And everybody was really unhappy.
It was really bad because like there were areas in Germany, and specifically like southwest Germany, close to where the Pennsylvania Dutch came from, where like 70 to 90% of people died sometimes from the wars and also the sickness and famine and all that stuff that comes with it.
Yes.
It was not a good time.
It was, okay. And now keep in mind, everything Hexmarie just said, that's happening now. More shit's about to happen. And it's all happening at the same time. So the area that you were just talking about, we call the Palatine. Okay. So that's the area, the southeast or southwest?
It's southwest, like near the border of France.
Yes, that's where we are. Thank you so much. So southwest, this is like really shitty for them, right? So now in between all of this war, for like 300 years almost, there was burning times because there was issues with the Protestants and the Catholics. There was a bunch of political instability, and you had this 30 years war, and they were all happening at the same time, and everybody was dying and everybody was starving, and it was really bad. So during this time, over 100,000 people were also accused of witchcraft, and a lot of those people were killed because everybody's so nervous about the Christianity thing. It's not just about witches. It was about political power. It's about different kingdoms and different kings. So it's a lot. So there was a lot of fear and everybody was really nervous. And so they were accusing their neighbors. They were accusing this one, that one, whoever, because people were scared. And sometimes accusing someone is better than you getting your own neck cut off. So you say, oh, I saw Sally out there in the nighttime when she was just trying to go to the bathroom. But so you said she was dancing in the moon. So it's fine.
A lot of it, too, was like noblemen accusing beggars and things.
Yes.
So there were so many layers to it. It was definitely very nasty. And it was also a time when we have this narrative about feminism, specifically feminism, that it's like things used to be the worst. Cavemen were bashing women over the head, and they've just gotten better and better till now. But that's actually not that accurate. Because actually between the late Middle Ages and then now was some of the worst time in history for women, at least European women and German women specifically. And they lost a lot of rights. They lost the ability to work outside the home during the Reformation. That was one of Martin Luther's big things, where he's like, women should be in the kitchen. And he shut down like all the what is it when it's a monastery, but for women?
Oh, a convent.
A convent. He shut down all the convents, and those women had to get married or become spinsters, and the women were kicked out of the trades. So it's just like things were very bad. And obviously, one other big thing that was happening then is this is when capitalism was made. And so what was happening is there used to be these arrangements with the noblemen and the peasants, where the peasants lived on the land and kind of belonged to the land, and then the king would take his taxes, but the peasants had a lot of freedom. Like there were common areas that were owned in common. The forests were like food forests that everyone could access. Everyone had a right to hunt and fish. And then during this time, during the Reformation, there's a crisis in feudalism where they're like not making enough rents. And because of all the plagues and stuff, the peasants have more power because of there aren't that many, so they can leverage that because a lot of people died. And so then what the people in charge are doing is what is called enclosing the commons. So the things that used to belong to everyone, like the food forests and the rivers, the king starts to even sometimes put fences up. This happened in England too. This was a process all through Europe where they put fences around these places that used to belong to everyone so that people can't live off the land anymore. And so that forces people, that creates serfdom, and that forces people so they can't live off the land anymore, so they become vagrants. And there's all these problems that just keep cascading from that. And then that is ultimately too what eventually, because the Pennsylvania Dutch are not, as a rule, they're not like adventurous people per se. Like my family's like, you look at my family history, it's like they land in Lancaster County and they don't move until my mom. And that's like 300 years. So it's like knowing them, it's like, they're not the kind of people to just be like, hey, let's uproot all of our livelihoods on a whim. These aren't like Vikings. These are like farmers. These are like, and so it's like you really sense that for them, there was a lot of desperation where it's just, they were sick of the wars, and then they were also, and Germany and France keep fighting over them too.
That's what I was going to say. And the French right now are controlled by the Holy Roman Empire, right? So the Catholic Church. So that part of Germany that you're talking about, it was literally in the middle of it all. Like it sucks. Yeah. Like it's it's really bad.
The maps with like the witch trials too. It's the same thing where it's like the concentration of the worst ones are down in southern Germany and southwest Germany. It's like, I don't know. It's like these days, people love to be online, and I would love the social programs of Europe too. Of course, I'm a socialist, but a lot of people will idealize that. And I think a lot of people who are into this, like German folk magic, talk about how Germany's better than some of my friends who live there. But like for me, I'm like, we got to miss World War II.
It's a plus.
We missed a lot. World War I, too. I feel like I've gotten a good deal, I feel like. And it makes me want to feel more committed. to hear because it's like I've really benefited. Oh,
Yeah, I know. It's
and
so true.
responsibilities, and I love America too. Anyway, I'm getting off topic.
No, you're not, because we're getting back to what you're talking about. So, so we got all that stuff is happening. 30 Years War, witchcraft trials. The French are like, screw you guys. You're too close to us, so we're gonna fight you. So there's a lot going on, right? So a lot of people, like you just said, like a lot of people were like, we gotta get the fuck out of here. Like, this is crazy. Of course, like you said too, they don't want to leave. And most people around the world would probably choose not to leave where they lived if it was fine. They don't want to leave. People be like, as much as I also find there's a lot of things that I will complain about the United States, but there's a lot of things that I am lucky that I grew up in the United States. People will be like, oh, no, people come from other countries because they hate it there. It's not because they hate their culture or they hate it there. Usually it's because something is going wrong. And they don't want to die, or they don't want their family to die, or they realize they can't, their children will not progress in that society, so they leave. It's not because they want to. Anyway, a lot of people left. And there was a couple different groups. There were a lot of settlers, and they were called the Fancy Dutch. So they're descendants from mostly Catholic, Lutheran, and Reformed Christians. So they came, a lot of them were able to come first, probably because they had a little bit more money, not that much, but a little bit. So then there was other Germans who came, and they came because they were being persecuted. So those are your Anabaptists. So your Anabaptists are people that we know as groups like the Amish or Mennonites. They were also called the Plain Dutch. So they were, but they were not only these people, they were also people who were farmers who came from especially this part near France, Alsace-Lorraine region, where there was a lot of these German people who were living there. Some of them came from the Netherlands, some of them came from Switzerland. So the Anabaptists specifically, they first sought refuge in Germany, but then they left and they went to Pennsylvania. Now, you're like, what? Pennsylvania? Yes. So William Penn, he was a Quaker leader, and he was given Pennsylvania from King Charles II because King Charles II owed his dad a bunch of money. So instead, he's like, do you want this big piece of land? And he's like, okay. So initially he called it New Wales, but then he called it Sylvania from the Latin word silva, meaning forest. However, then King Charles eventually took matters into his own hand and named it Pennsylvania, or Penn's Woods, in honor of Penn's father. Penn was like a Quaker. If you guys know anything about Quakers, they're really into everybody being cool and having rights and shit. They were like, he was like, I want everybody to come here and do whatever the fuck they want and have a good time. He made it safe for people who were getting persecuted in Europe to come over. The Baptists and the Fancy Dutch and the Plain Dutch were like, great, we're having trouble over there and we need some place to hang out. So they came. A lot of them settled in the southern central areas of Pennsylvania, now called Pennsylvania Dutch country. Now, Dutch, you're like, yeah, some of them came from the Netherlands, but Dutch, people said Dutch because they meant Deutsch, Deutschland, like Germany. That's like
And Dutch used to be, it's an archaic English catch-all term for all the Germanic languages.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I used to think that too, because I used to think it's like, oh, they're trying to say Deutsch, and I even think that from other Pennsylvania Dutch people. Then in just the past couple years, I did some more research and realized, oh, they used to just say Dutch because you've been talking about the Rhineland. So the Rhine River runs straight through the heart of the majority of that first wave of settlers. And that river starts in Switzerland in the Alps, and then it flows north and exits in the Netherlands.
Okay.
It's the line between Germany and France at the southern part. And then it goes up and it goes through, I don't have the whole map, but there's all those countries there.
That's funny.
European geography than I used to be. So not perfect. But so they would come out of the Netherlands because that's how they would migrate. They'd get on boats and go. And so everyone who came from the Germanic speaking countries, they called them all Dutch.
Wow.
It does get very confusing. I even just like, I'm often like, okay, how should I word this? It's like, Yeah.
I'm so glad you told me because I always heard it was because of the Deutsch thing. But so now I understand. Thank you so much. This is what I'm talking about. This is why I love to learn. Okay. Now I know. They came, some of them even settled in areas of Maryland, North Carolina, and Virginia. But even here, they would still have problems, right? Because shit is just, it can never be okay. So for anybody. So one of their most famous critics was Benjamin Franklin, who complained about them in his book. He wrote a whole book complaining about them. In 1751, he was like, why should the Palatine boars be suffered to swarm into our settlements and by herding together establish their language and manners to the exclusion of ours? Why should Pennsylvania, founded by the English, become a colony of aliens who will shortly be so numerous as to Germanize us instead of us Anglifying them, and will never adopt our language or customs any more than they can acquire our complexion? What a dick thing to say.
What? Oh, I forgot. We're playing the Who's the Whitest game.
I'm like, acquire our complexion. I'm like, but y'all white. Like, everybody is white.
It really shows you when you get into the weird history of the concept of whiteness, it really shows you just how bogus the whole thing is. Yeah. And they would say that too. Even in Germany, I've come across stuff like, I need to actually finish it. I've read half of it, but The History of White People, I can't remember the author right now. Such a good book. But she goes into all these concepts of race and goes back to Germany. And it's like the Germans and English and Americans just like, one-upping each other on how the worst idea you could make. And and they always are saying that like Southern people, that the Anglo-Saxons are the most, I guess, the whitest and most evolved humans. And even the more Southern you get in Southern Germany, those people are like swarthy and more like animals. And they're like, it's just like, you guys. This is why we shouldn't have like royals who don't like be part of society and just get to sit and write stupid books.
Yeah.
Okay. This is no one, like, you guys are almost exactly the same.
Everybody needs to just take it down a notch. Like, please, drink some water and get a nap.
No one wins.
It's okay. Oh, God. So, Benjamin Franklin's pissed off because they're speaking German and they won't, quote unquote, assimilate when everybody's white. So it doesn't matter. He's mad. So anyway, that's fine. So they had some problems. But some of the quote unquote fancy Dutch were able to gain some respect because they were seen as really hard workers and they were very industrious, and they had businesses in Philadelphia where they started their own area called Germantown, which is still there today. They have great Christmas fairs and they have really nice stuff. It's really cool. The Pennsylvania Dutch ended up playing a large part in the Revolutionary War, especially because a lot of the Revolutionary War was in Pennsylvania, like Gettysburg, Yorktown. And then Gettysburg, I meant towards the Civil War, because they also were in the Civil War too. They were out here fighting for America, and America was still pissed at them. It's so rude. I think that happened with every group, basically.
And it's interesting because I did a little research since the last time we talked. This stuff with Benjamin Franklin, and I can't remember his name right now. I think it was Sauer, and he had started the first German printing press in Philadelphia, and so he was rivals to Benjamin Franklin.
Okay.
And Sauer was against the Revolutionary War because he thought, we're just going to form standing armies and it's just going to create problems and we'll never stop being in wars. And isn't that why we came here together?
Yeah.
We're going to end up in the exact same position we were in Europe, and then other people in Benjamin Franklin and are like, that's naive. And when that side won the Battle of History, and I see that Revolutionary War was like a initiation that like tied us to America, and it, in a lot of ways for worse, solidified us into that American, the machine. Yeah.
It's wild.
And there's a lot of ghost stories from that time, like a lot of Revolutionary War and Gettysburg ghost stories. It's like that. The effects of that still like ripple through the community, I feel like. As it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh. So then, as you had said before, actually, during the World Wars, so the First and Second World Wars, which were like the quote unquote bad guy ended up being Germany both times, right? So a lot of Pennsylvania Dutch and German Americans stopped speaking German and started speaking English because they were trying to assimilate more and just be like, I'm just a white guy. I'm just a white guy, which I can't blame them because shit happens like that today whenever something goes wrong. And some people cannot help the way they look. So they are attacked for looking like whoever everybody decided they want to be mad at this week. The Pennsylvania Dutch were like, maybe we can get away with just speaking English and then nobody will realize and people won't be assholes to us. Yeah, so a lot of areas where people were speaking German, just like you said, your great-grandfather was speaking German, people stopped because they were like, this is getting touchy now. But groups like the Anabaptists, a lot of them, most of them still speak German. And depending on if they are, how much they are in contact with everybody else in their area, some groups don't speak English at all. They'll just speak German.
And people in the Midwest too, like a lot of the Midwest had tons of German newspapers, and most of those closed down during World War I, but then in the heart of like Pennsylvania Dutch country, it still was where everyone spoke German. Like I remember my great grandpa, he lived until just a few years ago. And so I knew him growing up, and my grandfather didn't speak Pennsylvania Dutch, but he understood it. But he was that generation where they stopped speaking it. And my great grandpa would sit around and just be like, oh, in my day, I can't do it well, but he had a German accent. And he's like, my day, everyone used to speak Dutch, but now everyone's speaking Spanish. It's just like, yeah, Grandpa.
Is that true, Gramps? Okay. Fine. Don't worry.
And he would say the English this, the English that, just like normal Americans. English, blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, yeah.
That's one thing I love about like former Amish TikTokers. They'll be like, the English and their button-up shirts. Like, I love what they...
Oh my gosh, I need to find the reality show, but there's a reality show where they take Amish people around and show them like normal life.
Yeah.
And they took these two young women to the grocery store and they saw in the floral section like sticks wrapped up.
Yeah.
And one was just like, they're selling sticks? I wish people will buy anything. And one of them was like, come on, English people are really busy. But he was like, I think they're lazy. It's like, I get so called out. I'm like, oh, I did buy sticks last year.
First of all, I'm like, they're not wrong. To be honest, they're not.
You see?
English people will buy anything, and she's right. It's so sad. She's so right. That Amish girl's like, these people are dumb. You know you can get this for free in the forest.
No, I mean, it's just like walk outside, idiot.
That is so funny. Oh, God. Oh, that is our short history of the Pennsylvania Dutch. And I learned so much. I love it. Now we're going to go on to our story time. We're going to talk about Frau Berchta. Now, I'm probably not saying that wrong.
Yeah, it's Frau Berchta, but
Berchta.
Yeah, like beer.
Berchta. Okay.
Berchta. Yeah, it took me a while. I made those first mistakes publicly on TikTok. Pronouncing English. That was funny.
Okay. And you know what? Because it's the way it's also written. I'm reading it and I'm like, that's not right. Okay. We're going to talk about Frau Berchta. And I'm going to put it in the show notes. We're going to have a little sensitive content warning. At times, we are going to talk about child loss. So if you're sensitive to that, it's no problem. I'm going to put a little note and I'll let you know when we'll talk about it. We won't talk about it too long, but she has a lot to do with that. So who is she? What's going on here? She has mad names, first of all. And they're all spelled slightly different. There's 6 names here. I'm not going to try to pronounce all of them because I'm going to say them wrong. sometimes it's Berchta, and sometimes it started with like a P. I don't know if it's pronounced differently or.
It's not really that different. I think it's Berchta, Perchten.
Okay.
Like the sounds in German are very similar, and so they're pretty much interchangeable.
Okay. Got it. All right. So where is she from? So this is a deity, right? So she's from the Alpine region of Germany. So this is southern Germany, Bavaria, and
Also like Austria and Switzerland.
yes, all of those. I just think of like beautiful snow-laden trees because that's what I think of in my mind.
And
like,
even into like France too.
okay.
So,
Yeah, like that tip of France where there's still.
yeah, and she'll be called Bertha sometimes.
Oh, okay.
Because she is a goddess, but then she became, during the Christian era and the Middle Ages, her mythology spread further as well.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's always layers.
Of girl. So in Germanic pagan tradition, this goddess she protected women and children. And so what I was reading, in some places she's seen as like a young woman. She has pearls braided into her long hair, and then she may wear a veil that's covering her face. And then sometimes she holds keys, and their keys are to happiness, and she has flowers in her hands. And then sometimes she's an old woman, and she holds a distaff, which is like a long stick that people use to spin flax. Think like, oh my God, my brain is melting today. When the fairy tale where we hit
Sleeping Beauty.
Sleeping Beauty, duh. I'm like, what's the God?
One.
Distaff is like a big stick that you put kind of next to your spinning wheel, and it has flax on it. It's a whole thing. I'll put a picture of it up in the blog that I never update, but I'm gonna try to update it this time. Yeah, and then sometimes she's seen with like tattered clothes and wild hair, so it just depends. There's a cult.
Yeah, and like an old woman too. She comes as an old woman too.
Yes. So there was a cult of Berchta, which followers would leave food and drink for her in hopes of receiving wealth and abundance. And this was condemned in Bavaria in 1468. And there was like a whole paper written about it by this guy named Thomas Ebendorfer von Hasselbach, because he was pissed off. So the thing about Frau Berchta that I was reading is that like it took a while for people to stop loving her. She was popular, like, and people didn't really want to give up this part of their mythology, even when things were becoming very Christian, because of just how, you'll see. She's just a really cool goddess.
Like people also back in the day, they didn't have all the methods of disseminating information and making sure everyone's on the same page.
Yeah.
So an area will become Christian. It goes through the grapevine. Oh, the king's Christian now. We're all Christian now. However that goes down.
Mm-hmm.
And they're interpreting that in their own way. And for a long time, the liturgy and mass wasn't even in the dialects there. So it wasn't in German. They're speaking in Latin.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, there's this parallel development where the things people already believe, they're like, oh, yeah, that's good Christian stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, this is just normal Christian stuff.
I feel like when the church first started, they did a terrible job of trying to Christianize everybody, because they were like, there was a guy who was born to a virgin, but we're not even going to explain this in your language. We're going to explain it in a dead language. And everyone's like, what?
It's also, it was a method of control in a different way, because that's how it was in the Roman Empire. They just continued their MO, because if you, like the same region that the Pennsylvania Dutch come from, part of it was part of the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
The Palatinate was part of the Roman Empire. And so they brought grapes there. So that part of Germany actually is famous for their wine. And you have the cults. The way it would work is that you would pick, once you're Romanized, whatever your local deities you're interested in, you pick the closest Roman deity that you're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And then you will say that deity will get an epithet. So the most popular in that region would have been like Mercury. So you will have Mercury of this place, Mercury of that place, but it would have been originally different local gods that get synchronized. And that same process happens, and that continued to happen through Christianity, where a lot of the churches that are dedicated to, like Mary, for instance, are even sometimes on healing, built on top of healing springs, or where a sacred linden tree was. And they will cut down the sacred linden tree and then carve a statue of the Virgin Mary.
Yeah.
Well, it's like there's this complex process where, because people get Christianized and that they still keep doing their thing. So it's not only just from the top down, it's also from the bottom up. And that's also why I have, as I've gotten into ancestry, I have, softened more around being triggered by Christianity to where it's like being more interested in that layer of the history. Because for the German people, we have been Christianized for so long that there really isn't very much information. We have a handful of texts and archaeological evidence, but even the way people's lifestyle was, they weren't building buildings. They weren't making permanent things that we can look back on. So seeing what continued to be important through the Christian era, you learn about all the little folk saints, and they're like, that ends up being threads that can tie you back further.
Yes. Oh, I love that. So speaking of what you were just saying about the Roman Empire, so it says later canonical and church documents, they characterize Frau Berchta as synonymous with other leading female spirits such as Holda, Diana,
Herodias,
Richella, who I don't know about, but I want to because that's a cool name, and Abundia. One of the big things about Frau Berchta is she is a protector of unbaptized babies, stillbirths, miscarriages, and abortions, those who've died by suicide, souls that lack anyone to remember them. And I'm like, oh my God, so sweet. Souls that have not received proper burials. She takes care of souls that would otherwise become ghosts. She's a psychopomp. She guides souls to the other side. She's said to live in a subterranean place with a gorgeous garden where she welcomes the souls of children who died in infancy. And so there was many women who looked to Frau Berchta in southern Germany because she was the goddess of abundance and she cared for children and domestic issues. Also, and I get this from I think it's an essay. No, yeah, it's an essay, but I'll put the link in the show notes where they talk. It's a blog post, where this lady in the blog post talks about how this was a time, obviously, of high infant mortality. So people were really like, it was very comforting for them to hear that Frau Berchta was taking care of their child who may have passed away. So that's especially if people are becoming Christianized, being baptized is a big thing. So if the baby passed away before they're baptized, people get very upset about this. But having this woman who you can think of as taking care of their child was very comforting to a lot of women. In some folk tales, she appears as a woman who nurses babies in the middle of the night, which is just very helpful. She's letting those moms get their rest. That's great. So this is a quick story about Frau Berchta. There is a author named Ludwig Berchta who narrates that there was in the village of, not even going to try to say this village's name, because there was a mom who had a child that died, and the mother was super upset, obviously, about this and was like just mourning, and she couldn't stop crying. So she would kneel at the grave for nights on nights. And one time, one of the nights she did it, people called it Berchta time. All of a sudden, Frau Berchta suddenly passed by her and was accompanied by a whole bunch of kids. And at the end of the procession, the woman saw her deceased child with a big jug in his hand. And the jug was so heavy that the child was trying to struggle. And the woman wanted to go help the child, but then she realized that the child said to her that the bucket is so heavy because of all her tears and that he would not be able to carry it. And basically, like, Frau Berchta's taking care of me, Mom. Don't worry, you don't have to cry so much anymore. And then after that, the woman ceased to cry. So she stopped crying because she knew that Frau Berchta was taking care of her baby, which is so sweet. I love that. Now, Frau Berchta was very popular. Like I said, the church had to force people to stop talking about her. Literally forced.
That's a goddess too. It's similar to Hecate in a lot of ways, where she can be very hardcore, but she also is a mother goddess. Like Hecate is known as the first mother. Interestingly, this is like a way old connection. So I'm going out on a limb here, but I even wonder if Hecate and Frau Berchta are connected really deep in the past, because one of the big theories of where Hecate comes from is Anatolia, which is now Turkey. And that's also where farming came from, and it was brought to Germany from Turkey. And Frau Berchta is associated with flax making. So the whole process, which is also associated with fate, because you have the fates spinning the thread of life. So that's that goddess of life and death at the same time. And so flax, we actually know now from even some pretty recent scientific papers in the last few years, where most of the language of German and English and French and most of the European languages, they are Indo-European languages, but the words for flax don't come from Indo-European. So they must be from the earlier culture, they call them the Neolithic farmers, who brought farming during the Stone Age. And flax was one of the plants they brought with them. And so it's like there's some very old threads there. And with that life and death, like Frau Berchta often was seen as an omen, like a bad omen of death if you see her and there's not a reason for her to be around. But also of love. She's a love goddess. So people would pray to her like on the 12 nights of Christmas. So her feast day is Epiphany, which is the last day of the 12 nights of Christmas on January 6th. And it was very common during that time for people to pray to Frau Berchta or do different things like visit certain places in nature or different rituals. We do similar things like with apple peels and things to find out who's going to be my true love. And they would pray those prayers to Frau Berchta to give them a dream, a vision of your true love, which is interesting because it's like both love and death and childbirth, the joy of that, and the sorrow of losing a child. Those are such extremes of experience, but they are like tied together. And I think she really speaks to all of that.
Yeah. Ooh, I like that theory. You heard it here first, folks. And so it's like, what about that? The archaeologists, get on that. Start figuring that out.
Please do all the hard work.
We're going to make theories and we need you to solve it. Thank you.
You did pretty good.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. I was like, you're talking. I'm like, yes, I agree.
Hecate also has one of her epithets. I don't know the original language, but it means that she has many hands. And the way that was expressed to me is that Hecate actually generates other goddesses. She like makes more goddesses that do her work everywhere. And I'm like, yeah, that's Frau Berchta. But I don't know. It makes sense too, because some of this you trace where things come from, but Europe has been pretty interconnected the whole time in different ways. And it's interesting to see if that is true, then how the Greeks became interested in Hecate and then what spread through Europe. It was maybe there was a part that is remembering, oh yeah, we love ladies like this.
Yeah.
Let's do some more.
Exactly. Yes. Again, when the church was mad about people still celebrating her feast day and those type of things, they were like, she's not allowed during Christmas. And no. And then people were like, no, we're still going to celebrate her. But they tried to start doing the same thing that they did to kind of Baba Yaga, right? They started making her like a witch, like something to be afraid of in certain areas, especially like places like Switzerland. They started associating her with like Krampus.
And Austria.
Yeah, Austria, sorry. I'm getting all my geography off today. I'm so sorry.
It's like Switzerland has similar practice. Like Krampus is specific, like a Yuletide, a spook that's associated with St. Nicholas. But then there's a wider tradition called Perchten, which are named after Berchta.
Oh.
which are basically like similar to Krampus, a little less devilish usually, but they're like all hairy. You usually covered in hair, these like crazy costumes. And in Switzerland, they can get really like they have beautiful Perchten and ugly Perchten and all sorts of combinations. And the beautiful ones have these like strange like doll masks and like little wooden villages on their heads and very interesting processions, but I would interpret them as embodying the wildness of nature and the dangerous spirit. So you're embodying it you're also like dressing up like the scary things in nature to scare them away, to scare away the bad weather. Yeah. And I think there was that process because there is this process of demonization, but then at the same time, it is also who she really is because she has always had that terrible aspect, but it's just mess around and find out.
Yeah.
Finding out, and they've been messing around for a while. So you have fewer people, I think. The way I interpret it is there are fewer people who have that good relation.
Yeah.
Where they're living right and the things she cares about, which is both women and children, but also order among humans so that we're living right together and everyone's being treated well and doing what they're supposed to and getting the work you need done because this is a winter climate. So, you got to be on top of it.
Yeah.
Survive the winter. But then also there's other things because in the Christian era, she became associated with not only Epiphany, but she would come in certain areas at all the cross-quarter days. So at different feasts, she was there to just be like, oh, no, you're supposed to stop working now, or you better be working now. And at certain things, it's even like she shows up as like making sure you better eat a lot at this feast because everyone has to. If you better have one.
Very clear
like
plate.
this very role she took on. It's interesting because in some of the folklore, they'll even say in towns where it's like they still love her, they're talking about how beautiful she is. They'll say she was really so kind, not like people say, but you better do what she said. She's hard. We love her. You do what she says.
I think that's like, yeah, again, with the whole, I feel like the stereotypical German woman. She's very cute and she's very pretty and I bet she wears great clothes and I bet all the colors. She looks fantastic. But she told you that you're not working today, so you better not pick up that spinning wheel. Like,
yeah, and also you better be done. You better have done something with what she gave you, and these rites. The purpose behind this time of year is that so the 12 days of Christmas were the time between the 2 years. They weren't part of the year, the previous year or the next year.
Yeah.
So during that time, it was believed basically the veil is thin, all the spirits are out. Berchta and Frau, they're leading the spirits of those who have died to the underworld, and which is dangerous. Like we give it its space. You try not to get mixed up in that. You stay home. But then all these rules, like about not spinning thread or not doing laundry during the 12 days of Christmas, part of that is because this is the time the fates are spinning the thread of fate for the next year. And so you want to give them space to do that. And we leave out these meals to get their favor. So there would be a meal at Christmas Eve, which the old pre-Christian German feast is Mother's Night, which we have documented as Mother Night from like England, but we know that custom is probably also going on continentally just because of what people were doing later, even if we didn't have a name. And where you leave a feast for the mothers on Christmas Eve, and that is to get their favor. So it's like the ancestors coming, because the ancestors are tied in with fate. And so you're being hospitable to them and showing them, look, we're living a good life. Look, we made you all this beautiful food. You can bless us with more abundance because we're going to use it well. And we respect you. And then there's also the nature part of it, because these are nature goddesses too. Like we're living good with our animals this time of year. There were all sorts of things you did to keep your livestock healthy. You would do like smoke cleaning for the house, but also the livestock to keep them healthy. And then you would also like Frau Berchta, their stories. It's very common to believe that animals could talk on Christmas Eve. And this comes to Pennsylvania. I found folklore where they believe, oh, the animals will talk to you on Christmas Eve or on the 12 days of Christmas. And they might be talking about Frau Berchta, what Frau Berchta says, what Frau Berchta thinks of you, or, telling them what they want you to do.
Yes.
There's this whole like depth of meaning to that time of year. And it really is to get abundance and health for the next year. Anyway.
No, it's true. So everything you said is a lot of what I was going to say. So I love it. It's perfect. And you explained it better than I was going to. So thank you. I'm just going to reiterate that Frau Berchta, she keeps up these cultural taboos and everything you said, because during the winter, you're going to be cold. So you need to get all your work done now so that you can make your shit, make your socks, and make your family socks. So everybody's all right. You got to have all your food together because winter's coming. You can't, there's not plants all over the place. We got to get your jams and your jellies and all your cans done. She also was mean, but it's not, she was mean for a purpose. She wasn't just being mean to be a nasty goddess. She was being mean to tell people, get your shit together. Yeah.
And also, like, why do we think a mother goddess should never be mean?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Why would you want that? Because when you think of your own mother now, if you have everyone has their own experience with their mom. I'm lucky that even though I have a lot of crap in my background, I have a good relationship with my mom, and she always protected you. So think about a mama bear.
Yeah.
A mama bear will murder someone easily to keep her cubs safe. And that's what's needed from moms a lot of time. And that's something that in our culture and with this cult of the Virgin Mary and her being and becoming increasingly with the Reformation seen as just a passive vessel rather than this goddess who has the powers of positive and negative things. But that's what power really is. If you can't protect yourself, you don't have any power. And I just think too, I think when you're a mom too, you realize, I'm realizing that now with my daughter because I was high strung. Obviously, I said I had some mental health stuff. So I never wanted her to cry. It stressed me out. So I was she's 4 now, but I was a little bit lenient for sure. She's the only child and only grandchild. But now that she's 4, I'm sorry, you can't not go to the bathroom all day. Yeah. I will track you down and put you on the toilet right now.
And you're like, this is for your own good. I know you don't want to do it, but you're gonna get a bladder infection.
Yeah. Like, oh yeah, all of this has this place, and you need all your cards in your hand, depending on the situation. But then think about it. The mama bear is the perfect example because there's nothing more like comforting and warm and safe and cozy than a mama bear to her cubs.
Exactly.
So those two things are not opposites. And I think that's been one of the most valuable lessons I've gotten from this path and from connecting with Frau Berchta and her stories and Frau Holla as well, is this healing of that concept of feminine or what it means to be a mom or a woman. And it's this total wholeness where my sexuality, my fierceness, my being a mom, my ambitions, all those things are me.
Yeah.
And I don't have to let them go. Of course, it's a transformation. It's not the only transformation in life, but it's a big one. But you still get to be a whole person on the other side of that. And I think that is really hard in our world, and it's not what we get messaged from society, and especially like growing up Mormon, I feel like I grew up in a bunker punishment or something sometimes where it's like a time capsule where I was a little 11-year-old girl in the year 2000 being like, we're teaching to iron men's dress shirts. That's so nice. It's like, this is the 2000s. This isn't 1950.
That is so important. I think that a lot of women struggle with that because you see all these, even like mommy bloggers, right? They're like, I'm a mom. And they make that their whole personality and identity. Yeah. And you can just be yourself and be a mom, and you want to do this or do whatever you want to do. You can do that and still be a fantastic mother.
We need women to start embodying that wholeness because it has been a huge trauma, and it's really not only holding us back, but it's holding society back.
Yes.
Because the fact that it's so impossible to be a mom and have your career or a position in the outer society and how the hours don't match up and how isolated we are. All those things are how it's supposed to be. And that tension we feel is because what's happening is wrong.
Yes.
Being a mother is wonderful. It's a very special experience. However, a child doesn't just belong to you. There is supposed to be a whole community of people who have that kid's back.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to necessarily, you're supposed to have several adults around that love the child. That's what we're expecting evolutionary, being in more type 2 communities, tight-knit communities. And so this situation where moms are just so isolated and everything's put on their plate and they don't have the resources, they don't have the childcare, and they're having to work from home and the iPad's the only childcare available or whatever. Those situations, we need to find our power and change that. Every day, I'm like, I know I'm surrounded by Republicans, but I don't care. I want every Republican woman to have childcare.
Yeah, 100%.
I want all of them to have it. And why can't we all see what we're doing is valuable?
Yes.
So we should be, because it is very valuable, and it isn't saying that's the only thing that a woman's good for. That's the highest thing that's been used against women.
Yeah.
However, as a society, children are the most important thing. Because we're our future, but that's a society job.
Yes.
That's not an individual woman's job.
Yeah.
I think every day I'm just like, I'm ready. What string do I Google where I find the community where we're like striking and...
Yes! I'm so wound up right now.
Yeah. And I think the message I've got from Berchta in this time, because that is probably my most leaned on or intimate spiritual connection with as far as deities and things go. And I think what I have gotten from her, it is definitely, I don't know if you know that painting, Truth Coming Out of Her Well to Shame Mankind.
Yeah.
Where she's, if you haven't seen it, there's a well and a naked woman coming out, just like raging, yelling, like, and it's like, that is often the vibe. I'm really hard on myself, so I feel like her messages to me are really kind, but I'm already very critical of myself, so it's like I've done that job for her. But then it's like the message, it's like, here's this kind of terrifying vision you have right now. What's this terrifying dream about what goes on underneath the surface of everything? I feel like that. When we had the really bad fires out here before they started, I just had the waking kind of dream come over me one day that was just like, it was the fates, and the middle fate, I was getting closer to them. They were around a cauldron. The middle fate like ripped herself apart and became this scary crone and was just like throwing lightning. And then all summer there were just these fires, and it's just like, oh no. Guys, you know this? But Mama's angry. Mom wants to know this, but all the spirits, they're like joining with the earth spirits and they're pissed. So
Yeah,
listen.
something's going on.
This is true. So it's like my superstition. I'm just like, yep, we've ignored our responsibilities as humans and what it is to be a good human. And while we had figured out a way to live more in line with that for most of our history, and now we're not, and now we get to see what that's like. And that perfectly lines up with what you would assume would happen based on these superstitions, which is it's like an interesting, I don't know, it's like, whoa, okay.
I know. Yeah. Shit's going down, and
I know.
It's not
But
good.
I think it is that thing of being able to lean in and trust it a little bit, because these things are bigger than us and we can transform. If we can't find it in ourselves to change everything to make it better, we'll have a lot stripped from us. So like,
Yeah,
we'll
you
be
have to
helped
deal
a
with it,
lot,
right? I
So
know.
that got dark, as it does.
Okay. It got dark, but it's the truth. It's the truth, though.
That time of year, it's the darkest. The Yule is the darkest, and Berchta comes on Epiphany. That's symbolically the rebirth of the light. So this whole thing is like doing everything we need to do to be living right and get caught up as well as you can. And then we're going to really create that joy and warmth and home and connection in ourselves and with each other so that we can hold ourselves together and get through the hard times and believe that a new day will come.
Yes, we're doing it. We're doing it. Oh, I love it. Oh, that was so good. Thank you. Oh, that was a word. So the other last things I'll say about Frau Berchta is that, so there's this whole thing about her slitting people's bellies open and removing their guts, and she stuffs it with straw and pebble. And this is children and young servants if they haven't been doing what they were supposed to be doing. Also, still in some Alpine villages, they still leave food out for her on Berchta, which is, like you said, the last day of the Epiphany. And her favorite meal is herring and dumplings and schnapps or some type of other alcoholic beverage. Oh, wait, I forgot the other really important thing I wanted to say. Last thing. This is the last thing. We talked about animals before. So her sacred animals are crickets, swans, and geese. In many tales, they say that she has one splayed or webbed foot like a goose. Some people think that she may also be the original Mother Goose. Mother Goose is a French thing, but as we've spoken about, France and Germany share a border, especially in the southwestern part and southeastern part. So it could be all related. And they also say she may have been like a shape-shifting goddess because she was in the woods and she loved animals and she's doing her thing. Okay, so that's Frau Berchta. There's a lot more you can learn about her. I put some resources up. And that brings us now to the end of our show. Oh boy, this has been so awesome. Thank you so much for that. Yes, first of all, you are a speaker. Like, you need to be out there telling people what to do.
I do like tracking. I have resident Pisces though, so I'm just like, I just keep going and going. And I'm like, and in my head, I'm like, oh, this makes so much sense. This is so simple. I just have to explain to you everything about physics, everything that's in the future. And then I lose myself in a way, but I enjoyed hacking. So it's like, okay, let's just keep going till I say the right thing.
No, you're doing great, first of all. And I love, you are very knowledgeable. So it's not like you're just talking. You know so much. And so thank you for sharing that with everybody. This is great. Yes. So first thing, I know you are going to be teaching a class. You want to tell us a little bit about your class?
Yeah, so my class will be on December 2nd, and it is going to be like a 2 to 3 hour class all about Yule and the 12 days of Christmas from a folk magic perspective. So I'm calling it Good Yule, Rediscover the Animist Magic of the Old Christmas Traditions. And we'll be diving deep into a lot of this stuff, into the history, into the folklore surrounding it, and then also the many spirits that are associated with this time. And it being a time of ancestral work and divination, like hopefully giving people a guide to get them started understanding this. It's a pretty complicated topic, like giving them what they need so that they can start to enact some of this and make that sacred time, and then hopefully connect with their ancestors and their spirits. I know for me, it has become like the heart of my year, and it has really deepened my practice and my spirit work to a whole other level to take these 12 days and dedicate them. Like, it's a great experience. And I think for anyone like me who just always did love Christmas, I was like a Christmas girl, not a Halloween girl per se, although I love Halloween too. It was very like validating to be like, oh, Christmas is German Halloween. Everything makes sense. No, it makes sense.
Yes. Oh, it sounds really good. I hope I can make it too, because I was looking at my calendar.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to have you. That'd be fun.
Awesome. Yes. There's a link in the show notes to the class, so everybody can look at it. So you want to sign up, it's right there. And also just tell us where we can find you on the internet.
The best place to find me right now is on TikTok. I'm at Hex Marie there. So HEXMARIE. And that's my home base at the moment. I think I will be making an Instagram in the next little bit because I'm just realizing all the German folk magic people have gotten burned out on TikTok. So I still love it. It's like it is such an up and down, but it's also like I love that it's like the young people and it's so innovative, and I love how intimate it is and messier. Like Instagram's so perfect. Everyone looks perfect. I get jealous of my friends. I'm like, what is this dark magic? I never feel jealous like that. I don't know to my own horn, but I'm usually like, pretty smart and talented compared to everyone. But then the internet is like this thing that it's like, okay.
I know.
I'm gonna be like designing an Instagram warrior stuff. Not for now. You can find me on TikTok.
No, you're funny. Oh gosh. So this has been fantastic.
Yeah.
So happy you were here. Everybody, this is Dine with the Divine. Again, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Threads, and maybe YouTube soon. I gotta figure it out. I'll let you know. So if you really enjoy this show, like I said, if you can give us a rating, that's always awesome. I always appreciate it. You can listen to us anywhere you find your podcast, Apple, Spotify, whatever. And if you have any suggestions or anything you want to talk about, let me know. Email me at dinewiththedivinepod@gmail.com. And if you want to follow me, Ashley, I'm at SankofaHS, and that's SANKO. Oh gosh, I forgot to how to spell my own handle. That's at SANKOFAHS, and I'm Sankofa Healing Sanctuary on Facebook. And thank you also for being here. Thank you again, Hexmarie, and I hope you guys all have an awesome week, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.